my friends. Lori Ashcraft here. I'm your host for Viva La Evolution, which is sponsored by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a training and consulting branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And today, oh my gosh, today we have an amazing guest. In fact, I'm just going to put his bio on the blog section, because I can't begin to tell you how amazing Dr. George Woods is. I've gotten to know him over the past 3 or 4 years and have just admired him and learned so much from him. And I'm delighted that he's made time to talk with us today. And we're going to be talking about relationships and how relationships are the key to healing. And I brought this up in earlier podcasts talking about, it's not about our degrees or our paperwork or our brilliant treatment plans. It's really about how we be with the people we're serving that makes a difference. Having integrity around that, having hope around that. I've said to people sometimes, forget about everything you learned. Don't forget about it. Just scoot it over there. And what you need to do is you need to do 2 things. You need to be inspiring and irresistible. And when you can do those 2 things, then you've got people's attention and they're ready to grow with you. Well, then how do you do that? How do you be inspiring? How do you be irresistible? Well, you be curious about them. You want to know about them genuinely, not just making it up, but really wanting to know about them, believing what they say, and supporting what they want to do. But that's the way people get inspired. Think about it for yourself. Who inspires you and what is it that they do? It's that kind of stuff, real simple stuff. Yeah. And that makes what you have to offer irresistible, because it's kind of rare. It's not sitting down in front of somebody, filling out their paperwork in front of them. That's not inspiring. It's not irresistible. You got to do that, but you actually can do that in a way that's inspiring. We can talk a lot more about that if you want, but I don't want to take any more time right now, because I want to get to Dr. Woods. I don't even know what to say. I just think you're going to be delighted in this. So here we go. Let's have me stop talking and let's move into our conversation with Dr. Woods. Okay, here we go. Well, George, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. I've really been looking forward to spending a little time with you and having an opportunity to share some of your brilliance with our viewers. So thank you very much for making time for us. And
go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, today we're going to be talking about relationships, and I know you're an expert in that from many different perspectives. And I'm just looking forward to what we can discover today. So, where would you like to start? Do you have a starting place?
I first of all, I want to thank you for having me on today, Lori. I feel as though our relationship has been one of smiles.
Yeah.
And when we meet and when we talk, it's fun and it is thoughtful, and I am continually moved by both your compassion and your brilliance, and that makes it even more fun.
Thank you.
So I was thinking about the word relationship,
Hmm.
right? And what does it mean to relate? Right. And I think the ability to relate is so important in being a human
Right.
and
Yeah.
right being being able to foster that connection with someone else. Um, and that's kind of where I'd like to start.
Yeah, well, let's start there.
Mm.
Um, uh,
Well, one of the things that you talked about is through relationships that we learn about ourselves.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Um, and I know when you said that about being an expert in relationships in many ways, I started laughing to myself, and I was saying, well, I'm wondering if she means my failed relationships or my or my successful ones. But certainly there was a time in my life where I knew so little about myself. I judged myself by my relationships.
Hmm. Hmm.
If that person cares for me, if that person feels I'm worthy, then I must be.
Hmm.
Um, and it was obviously a tough time for me, but it also gave me the opportunity to kind of learn about myself through others.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've had that same experience, and sometimes, uh, I mean, I don't know that I have a certain strength, um, and people will tell me that I'm good at something, and I go, oh, yeah, I guess I'm good at it. So that's a kind of an example of learning from others about my strengths. But I must say, I must say, I don't know, this is probably not a good thing. Well, maybe it is. That I also learn about my blind spots and
Right.
parts of me that could use some adjusting or correcting. Things that
Right.
I would not see in myself because I'm
Right.
blind, and others, can be quite annoyed by them. And well, it's painful sometimes to learn about yourself that way. If others hadn't been able to talk to me about it, I'd still be doing a lot of very annoying things. Something that I see over and over, and I'm just thinking about what you're saying about trauma and how it can impact our relationships and how we relate to other people. Um, the people that I see in our field who are the best, uh, I feel bad to make this general statement, but I don't know what else to do with it. The best at this sort of thing, at positive, healthy relationships with others, I'll call them healing relationships, are peers.
Right.
And I think because of their what they've been through, um,
Right.
there's always trauma in that, um, and all kinds of other things. Because of all of
Right.
the things they've been through, somehow they're able to use that in a way that enhances a relationship with other people. And
Right.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, peers learn to reframe their past so they can regain their future. Because when you're down and out, you don't think you have a future. But if you can reframe your past and pull some meaning out of it, like, okay, now I get that all those things happened to me, but I can use them to help someone else. So no longer is it this morass of negativity that holds them down. It's almost like gifts that they can hand off to other people. And then they come across in a way that's mutual. And I think that's part of the healing process. And
Well, you know, go on, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
You know, the part of truly understanding trauma is to understand traumatic growth as well as
Yes.
traumatic stress.
I'm so glad you
And
brought that up.
it's not something that we really in psychiatry for sure, or medicine, it's not something that we really focus on. When you look at the classification systems like the DSM, they're full of pathology, right?
Yeah.
You know, they talk about the 5 criteria for this or the 9 criteria for that, but they don't talk about the 1 criteria for happiness or the 3 criteria for hope. You know what I mean? And so you really get the idea that all of what one goes through is pathology.
Yeah. Yeah.
But traumatic growth is really when you can take that and look at it and grow from it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great literature on traumatic growth, but no one ever talks about it.
Well, you and I've talked about it, but we're in the minority, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But the powerful minority,
Yeah. Yeah.
the power.
Yeah.
You know, um, I don't want to kind of make this into in any way negative, but I will tell you, I think I've already told you this in private. You know, I've got a talk now that I do fairly often. Um, and the name of the talk is Everything I Learned About Psychiatry I Learned in Sales School.
Oh, yes. You talked with me about that. Yeah.
And it's true because what I learned selling computers for IBM in San Francisco in the late 1960s was how to relate to people,
Yeah.
how to find out what they needed, right? How to be, open with them about, what I had available. How to get past no. Um, and I think when you've gone through that experience yourself as a peer, you've had to you've had to go through all those steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can see them coming, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You can see them coming.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the beauty of that peer relationship is I really have been there. And I'm a model for you to both be exactly who you are and to be happy and be successful
Mhm.
in that struggle.
Mhm. Mhm. And
You don't
they're
have
not,
to.
as you're saying, they're not just spouting this off because they have been there. I mean, they are the evidence. In fact, something we usually do, peers, is like I could say, I'm Lori Ashcraft, PhD, but I always also say ITE, which means I'm the evidence. So we give ourselves a degree
I,
for
I love
having,
that.
yeah, I'm the evidence.
I, I love that. Wow, that's really amazing. I've never heard that. That's really beautiful.
Well,
Right.
if you, now that I've told you, you'll probably, once you see it, then once you hear it, you can see it everywhere. But you'll see it after a lot of people's name. Not a lot of people, but you'll see it after people's names now. ITE, I'm the evidence.
Well, in fact, I think I'm going to add it to mine, but
Okay.
You know, yeah, what that really does is it breaks down the um, it creates a different dynamic.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? It creates different. When I first finished my fellowship in geriatrics, I was working for um, the Family Service Agency in San Francisco, and my job was to go and meet with um, folks that at that time were my my current age, maybe a little bit younger. Some were older, um, and I didn't have an office, so I did home visits, and I still here 40 years later. I still do home visits because what I learned was it changes the dynamic.
significantly. Yeah, yeah. I
When
love
you're
that you
sitting on
do
some,
that, George. I didn't know you did that, but it sounds
oh,
just
it's
like you.
well, when you sit on someone's couch and you can ask them about their photographs on the wall, or you can see something that they um, cooked, or you can have a glass of water out of their refrigerator. It's really about what we're talking about. It's really about um, changing that, in my opinion, BS doctor client dynamic,
Yeah.
and really trying to learn who they are and have them learn who you are.
Yes. I just want to, I can't resist this. We've talked a little bit about this, but, we're talking about peers now who are able to often create amazing connections with people. Uh, Partly mutuality, partly because I've been there, partly because I have something to give you that I believe in. So I don't want to lump all professionals together and say this about us, them, since we're both. But when we first started training peers and putting them to work alongside other professionals, there was this thing about, well, they have to keep these same rules. And basically they were talking about professional distance, what we call professional distance. And they were talking about boundaries. Basically, the rules for how you relate to people that we're trying to serve. And it seems like we try not to have relationships with people. It's like you sit on that side of the desk, I'm going to sit on this side. I can ask you all kinds of questions, but you can't ask me any questions. You can't know much about me. In other words, the training that a lot of professionals get is to keep their distance. And that just strikes me as being so profoundly, I'm just gonna say wrong. I mean, I get why we would come up with that stuff, but it makes me think that on some level, the best we have to offer people, which is relationship, we don't do. And I think part of it is a lot of professionals are afraid they'll burn out, or they're afraid they'll be taken advantage of, and basically maybe they just don't want to feel the pain that they would have to feel if they were really in relationship. That was a lot of talking. What do you think about that?
Well, no, I don't think it was a lot of talking. I think it's something that we have to deal with. Why do so many professional healthcare and others, but certainly healthcare, resist meaningful relationships? I think you have to. Do you remember that trilogy, Dune? That
Yes,
science,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So Dune was this. For those that may not recall, this it was a science fiction trilogy. And one of the things that I will really remember was that the main character in the trilogy talked about how he would have to stand there and let the emotion go through him. He
mm,
didn't
mm,
hide from it. He
mm.
had to feel it. He had to let it go through him, and in order for him to be strong. And he talked about the difference between domination and strength.
Mm, mm.
And when, it's much, much different to be really, really strong. Um, it's different. And this is what so much of what I'm seeing in younger people now. It's different to be culturally competent and culturally humble.
Yeah,
Totally different paradigms,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Uh, and we really have been trained to be competent. But when you're humble, that means you're strong enough to expose yourself, to let the other person in, and yet do the job that you have to do.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
humility, right?
Yes. Yeah, I would.
Competence is, well, I know how to do this and I can tell you what to do and blah, 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 blah. But I think it really comes from a place of weakness, Lori. I
Mhm.
think we've been trained to be weak, right? And we've been trained to, and I think it's one of the reasons why we get so burned out as a field, because we've not been trained to be strong, and strength really means humility and humble and letting these things happen to us because we know we're strong enough to to deal with them.
Yeah. I love that, George. I love that. And I totally agree with that. I just had so many things come up when you said that. Um, I'm kind of I'm walking around in my head right now, looking for a tail. Um, hmm,
Well, I think that it's uh, it's often the difference that I think our culture forces on, and I'm getting ready to jump too far off into this, really forces on issues of gender, and the difference between dominance, which is often identified and I think true about men, and strength, which I really see so often as a feminine characteristic that really allows growth.
yeah,
Dominance does not allow growth.
no,
Strength allows.
yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, and and I think that's why we don't, as a field, we often don't see those we serve improve because we don't allow. Something happened a couple of weeks ago when you and Gene and I were together, and it seems like a little thing, but it's, to me, such a huge thing that I can't, I can't get over it. And as you know, we were all at a meeting together, and we were looking at some records. And you and Gene said, and it was really more kind of an offhand remark, um, that the records themselves, the data themselves, were deficit focused.
mm,
And how can you anticipate someone growing if the structure that you're providing for them is is not a structure of growth.
Yeah.
It's not a structure of recovery,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I mean, it really starts with that kind of thing. You know, when we back in relationships, it really starts with how do you address someone? How are you? How you doing?
Yeah.
Do you smile? You know what I
Right.
mean? You know, can you put your arms around someone? Can you, you know, do you shake them with one hand or two hands? I mean, you know, how do you make it clear to someone that you want to have a relationship with them?
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've done that very well. And just part of that conversation we were having is we were looking at records, and the record kept saying, see, referring to the person as the CLT, the
Right,
client this,
right,
the client that, and then the diagnosis. So when you frame a relationship that way, there's no room for you to be there or for them to be there. So we were talking about how powerful it is to just start using the person's name. Like John
right,
said, he did this instead of the CLT. Yeah.
right, right.
Just,
It
yeah.
seems so little, but it's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I
Right?
think what happens, what I see happen is, when we refuse to be, I mean, and most of this isn't even conscious. I think we don't go around saying, I am not going to be in relationship with these people. Um,
Right.
but on some level, we've often made that decision, and it's in my mind, it's a defensive strategy. I'm going to take care of myself
Right.
here. I'm not gonna, I'm not going to experience the pain of this person. Um, I'm not going to think about what they're up against. It's just too much. So I've got all these ways to keep you away from me. And then I'm, as being my professional self now, as a professional, when I do that, uh, my career becomes meaningless because I'm just my body's showing up every day, but my heart isn't, and I'm not open to really to truly be with somebody in a way that can heal both of
Right.
us. And that's when the burnout happens, because I'm just
That's
showing
exactly
up
right.
doing paperwork and defending myself from a really true meaningful relationship.
That's so true, Lori. I I'll tell you a quick story. When I first started working with people on death row, I went to see this guy, and he was supposed to be this big time gang leader, and just so you know, I have a bad mouth. I try to watch it, but I do have kind of a rough tongue. And so I walk into San Quentin and I walk in to talk with this guy. And I'm swearing, you know, I'm actually talking the way I probably always talk, but he didn't know that, right? And I'm swearing, blah, 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 blah. And he said to me, he said, um, I'm surprised at you. He said, you know, I expected more of you than that.
Huh, huh, huh.
Uh, and I it took me back, you know, and this guy who actually to this day is a friend of mine, um, a brilliant, brilliant guy. Really, over the years, we've established a relationship
Hmm, hmm.
because he has made me see him for who he is.
Ah, yeah.
And he's been willing to see me for who I am.
Hmm. Hmm. Lovely.
But if but if he hadn't said right off the bat, you know, what are you doing? Right? What's that all about?
Yeah.
Right? I was trying to be culturally competent. Right?
Yes.
I didn't know the culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Lori, how do you connect? What does connect mean to you?
Well, I think I do my best job of connecting when I just am in a place of curiosity about other people, or um and I'm not feeling judgmental about anything. I just want to be with them, and I want to know about them, and I want them to know about me. That's when I think I do my best connecting. It's not when I'm being smart.
Well, you're always smart, so that's never a downside. But um, the reason why I asked that is because um, when I have seen you connect, I have seen a directness
Oh.
that is disarming
Hmm.
and really wonderful.
Hmm.
Right? It's like
Hmm.
it's like, hey, and I don't mean you know, I mean a directness. It's just direct. And this is who I am. This is what I think. What do you think?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so what an opportunity for people to not have to figure it out.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, what if we stop trying to figure each other out and just could be with each other? Wouldn't that
Right.
be
That's
amazing?
exactly
Yeah.
what David Byrne, stop making sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
This
yeah, but I mean, yeah.
Go
Go on.
ahead. Oh, you go ahead.
Well, it's just that directness that I so um and I've seen it, obviously as we've got to know each other. I've seen it in the work that you do. Um, again, that our meeting 2 weeks ago, because there I saw it with those we serve.
Yeah.
Right, it's kind of like maybe my first time, kind of watching you in that arena, right?
Mhm.
And it was the Lori that I see everywhere,
Hmm.
and it was great.
Oh, thank you, George. You and I have both had experiences with addiction of one sort or the other. And I, so I've gone to all kinds of meetings, AA meetings, FA meetings, NA meetings. Um, and I know they don't work for everybody, but it's undeniable that something magic doesn't happen there. Something magic
Mm,
happens. And
mm,
it seems to directly hit that loneliness thing and relationship, um,
mm.
all at the same time. And there's a spiritual quality to it that helps people maybe move to a place of not being so spiritually lonely. What would you say about all that?
Well, it comes back to peers.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really comes back to peers when you tell these stories. So I'm on the board of this organization, and Saturday we had our board retreat. And the person that was doing the facilitation had us do this interesting thing. She had us give 4 dates in our life that were important to us.
Hmm.
And one of those dates was the date in which I became clean and sober of the first drug, not the second or the third. Right. But of the first drug. Um, and it it means everything to me. I mean, it means everything. And I had to, I was running a chemical dependency program at the time, and ended up going to my own AA meeting
Yeah.
in my own organization.
Yeah.
And um, now, frankly, because when someone tells that story, I can really say, I get it,
Yeah.
right? I don't get it intellectually. I don't get it because I've read it someplace. You know, I've been the guy that took the pennies to the crack man. I've been that guy,
Yeah.
right? So you don't need, and you know what it means? It means you don't need to be ashamed.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
don't need to think you failed, right? Um, you don't need any of that. And I think it's both that I think with a peer, it is that culture of humility. You
Hmm.
know, I really do get it,
Yeah.
right?
There's another quality to it too that I think is so admirable, and that is if if we do fail, if we do somehow not meet our own expectations or others, um, there's no judgment around that. I mean, I've just seen people go out and, as we say, do research in their addiction for a while and come back to whatever meeting it is. And it's
Right.
always, everyone's so glad to see you. So glad you're
Right.
back and there to
Right.
support you. There's none of that finger shaking or avoidance. And I think, that's part of the pure thing too that happens.
Well, and the other part of the peer thing that's really, I think, really important that you're pointing out, Lori, is um, I really do consider myself to be a scientist.
Mhm.
I really do. I really love thinking of myself that way. I believe it's true. Um, and when we're talking about addiction, the real science says relapse leads to recovery. That's what
Mm,
the real science says.
mm,
It,
mm.
it doesn't say, well, the first time out the box, you're going to be fine, nor the
Yeah,
second, nor the third,
yeah.
right? That's what the real science says. The real science says if you keep at it, you will be okay.
Huh, huh.
Right?
I kind of knew that, but I
And
didn't know there was any science behind it.
absolutely,
Huh,
absolutely.
yeah,
Um, because those that keep at it, it's that whole thing about hope,
yeah,
right? When you lose hope, you lose everything.
yeah,
But if you continue to think, I can't tell you how many, and I won't tell you how many crack pipes I threw. I'll never do this stuff again.
yeah,
Right, right, right. Um, but all I know is, for a long time now, I'm blessed because I haven't.
yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah,
right. Um, and and I think relapse is part of hope. But there's really good science that says you relapse, you'll come back. You relapse, you come back. And I think that's the part when we talk about relationships, and we talk about this differentiation between, those that we serve and ourselves. The best science does not support that distance. The best science does not support that isolation. The best science does not support that differentiation. The
yeah.
best science is what Lori is doing every day in recovery. That's really the best science.
Yeah. I'm so relieved to hear that. I I don't consider myself a scientist, but I appreciate it. I just don't have that kind of mind. But what you're reminding me of is a little, I won't call this a study, I'll just call it a private investigation I did. Because this is when I first started working in recovery and bringing the whole concept of recovery into the treatment arena. And I started noticing that some people were getting a lot better. And so I did my own little ethnographic investigation. And I made myself a little form and everything. Maybe I'm more of a scientist than I thought, because I actually had a form. Doesn't that mean I'm a scientist? I'm a
Absolutely.
researcher. So I have my little forms, and I interviewed maybe 15 people. And and nobody said, it was that treatment plan. When they got that treatment plan, when they wrote that up that way, that was brilliant. That's how I started getting better. I'm not saying these things are wrong or bad. I'm just repeating it. Nobody brought up their medication. Like, oh, I finally got on the right medication and now I'm just fine. Now I've taken medication for decades, so I know we all need it at some point. It wasn't the anger management class that I've now been through 5 times. So what was it then? Well, it was, I think it was about Bob. And I would say,
Right.
Bob, who's Bob? And Bob could have, sometimes it was, I don't know, someone at the 7-Eleven, or it was, sometimes it was a peer. It's sometimes, but not very often, it was the case manager. Not because they weren't doing their job, they were doing the job, but they might not have been doing the work. But so once they finally nailed down what it was that happened, what made the difference, I'd say, well, what did they do? And they would say things like, well, I think it's because they believed in me, or they saw that I had some potential, or they were just there. They just listened to me. And I would say, well, nail that down a little bit more. Take that to the next step. And they would invariably say something kind of like this. They would say, they were a real person to me.
Right.
And that's what made the difference. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, I've told you this story, and I'm going to just tell it again really quickly. But I met a young man, a new person in my practice a week ago Friday, and 2 weeks ago Friday, and we were talking about his history, his psychiatric history, and he went to this really kind of high-end assessment program in another state, and they did a lot. I mean, they did nutritional assessments and neurological assessments and spiritual assessments, and a lot of which I frankly thought the process was very comprehensive. And so I was asking him about it, and I was asking, and he was there for a month, and so I was asking him, so tell me what really made a difference. They talk to you about your spirituality, they talk to you about your nutrition, about your medications, your physical health, and he said it was Tony.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
said, Tony? He said, yeah, he said, I had to have someone to drive me to all these different places. Uh, and he said, Tony was the driver.
Huh.
And every time I got out of someplace, Tony would say, how'd it go? How'd it go? You
Yeah.
know, uh, what did you think? And if I was up, Tony was up, if somehow it didn't quite work, Tony would take me to get some ice cream. He said, come on, let's go get some ice cream. Let's kind of talk about it. Right. But Tony was not the psychiatrist, not the neurologist, not the psychologist, he was the wonderful driver
Mhm.
that knew what, and I thought about writing this place a letter and thanking Tony.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
but, I'm hoping that by getting involved in the work that you are doing, Lori, that I can further that culture, humility, and understanding of what it really takes. And it makes me very proud to be a part of the work that you do.
Oh, well, George, I am so, well, I'm just humbled to hear you say that, because with your background and your experience and just the person that you are, we've learned so much from you and are just so delighted to be traveling this road with you. So thank you very much. Well, I told you it was going to be amazing. And, we're talking about something that's so simple that it could easily be overlooked. But if you start paying attention to relationships, pay attention to how you're being with people, pay attention to how they're reacting to you, and play with that and find that sweet spot where you really get that click, that magnetic click that George and I talked about. When two beings actually connect, it's like, a magnet. When two magnets come together, there's a click. That's what we say, we really clicked. And that may be where that came from, I don't know. So pay attention to that. This can be a real growing edge for all of us. And like we talked about, peers are so good at this. We could learn from them, just watching them be with people in a way that is genuine and respectful and connecting, not performing. That's had to be one of my lessons. So that's it for now. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.